great. You look fabulous.
Thank you.
Your hair always is my envy.
Thank you, Mary.
Look at us, we're the extremes. All right.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to the Richness of Our Lives podcast. I'm your host, Mary Scott. And today our guest resides in Las Vegas. Now, this woman I met in Paris earlier this year. And from the moment I met her, I knew she was a force to be reckoned with. She is an international speaker. She is a mentor. She's an author. An entrepreneurial woman like no other. Please welcome Rachel Richardson. Rachel, hello.
Hello, Mary. Thank you for that great introduction.
You are so welcome. It's lovely to see you again. Now, Rachel, let's start. There you are in Las Vegas today. Let's start with your family. How did the early life of Rachel peg itself out?
Well, you know, Mary, to be honest, it was rather difficult. Again, I was born in 1977. However, in the 80s, there were not a lot of mixed children. Now you can't tell anybody's nationality. But back then, it was a little different. And so everywhere I went, you were either black or you were white. There was no mixed kids. There just weren't. You know, there weren't even really Hispanic kids, if I'm honest with you. I don't even remember seeing, there were a couple here and there, but not like you see nowadays. So it was very difficult. I was never white enough for most or black enough for any. And it just became one of those things where I began to question my own identity just because everybody else did. So when they asked me, what are you? Where do you come from? I started asking myself, what am I and where do I come from?
Yes, how challenging. I heard what you said then, you're neither black nor white. So how did that impact those early years? It must have been huge for a little girl. You know, she's just little, she's growing up. What would she have made of all this?
Well, she just started doing what everybody around her did, Mary. So when I was with my white family, I did what white people did. I had green bean casserole, and I went to a Lutheran church, and you know, I played that role very well. And when I was with my dad's side or my black family, we went to an apostolic Pentecostal church, and we ate, you know, oxtails and greens. And, you know, and I know when we spoke before, I mentioned the fact that I can look back in hindsight now, and I see I was the bridge to a lot of these cultures because, you know, a lot of white friends had no idea what was going on in black communities, and black friends had no idea what was going on in white communities. So I really got to go back with like the stories of the wilderness or the stories of, you know, the other side of the bridge, if I may, which then again, that helped me kind of become, you know, friends with certain people because I'm from Nevada. So I've always lived in either Reno or Las Vegas for my entire life for the most part. So everywhere I would go, depending on which family I was with, I got to bring back, you know, tales from the crypt, you know what I mean? And it was very fascinating to young people to hear the stories of, wow, you know, for the white side, it was more like, oh, the projects. And I'm like, I love it. It was a big grassy field. We had lots of kids out there. It was so much fun. Like, you know, and then my mother's family, who's white, they live in gated communities and there's not a lot of children. It's more like old people. They play handball, like Foursquare. We didn't do any of that in the other community. We played tetherball, and we did, you know, so just to be able to kind of go back and forth was really amazing because, you know, everybody just would kind of go, well, what do you do there? And what do they eat? And, you know, how do you comb your hair? And it was just, you know, as a kid, it was just like, I can't believe you guys don't know this stuff. It was very foreign to each side. And I got to kind of be the mediator, if I may. So it, you know, it kind of grew on me after a while.
Yes, so it went from who are you and where do you come from to this enormous curiosity about what's it like over there.
Yeah.
You know, and you once used the word with me, well-rounded, and I've been considering that ever since because you had a beautiful mix in so many ways, but in so many other ways, it was very challenging for a little girl to be able to understand her identity. There you are in two worlds. Yes, it was huge, what should I say, expandedness for such a little one, but at the same time quite challenging to where does Rachel fit into all this? Is that what you would say as well?
Yes, and you know, again, I came from a very broken home.
Interesting.
Go ahead.
And what does that mean? What does a broken home mean?
So my mother was a drug addict and alcoholic. She worked in the casinos, so there was a lot of addiction in the home. My father drank a lot on my dad's side, so a lot of times I was with older grandparents. And so, you know, because the homes were so broken and I didn't really have friends, who could I tell? You know, I was just really just trying to fit in wherever I went to. So there was no real rescue from, you know, now we have CPS and we have all these, you know, you can tell a counselor and you can do all these things if you're being abused, or whether that be sexually or physically or mentally at this point. But I just didn't have that escape. And so it was very hard to be able to tell anybody or anything. So again, I kept a lot of secrets. You know, my grandparents would always say, we don't air our dirty laundry. And because of those secrets, it really drove a young girl to be lost in, you know, such a big world. It was a very, you know, lonely existence at times.
So, in that loneliness, how did you get by?
I had an imaginary friend. I literally had an imaginary friend. I'm an only child. My mother has no more children. My father have no more children. But I have a lot of cousins, a lot of cousins. And so everywhere I went, it never felt like I was an only child. And so I really got by, you know, through a lot of imaginary play. You know, I did really good in school, but I didn't make friends well. So we would play school. You know, church was great, but I didn't understand it. So on my other cousins, we would play church. And it was really, both of these things were learning to socialize, learning how I should speak, learning how I should act or sit, or, you know, so that I wouldn't be so awkward all the time. So I had great cousins who tried to, you know, teach me everything I needed to know about life.
How wonderful. It sounds like those cousins were more like your brothers and sisters to you. Is that right?
100%, yes. And they had brothers and sisters, but anywhere I went, they always opened up their rooms to me. You know, my female cousins always shared a bed. They knew I wouldn't be staying long, so there was no jealousy. It was like, obviously Rachel, you know, something's going on in Rachel's home, and Rachel will be coming to join us, and you better not say anything. You know, don't ask her nothing. Don't say nothing. Leave that girl alone. Let her get some rest here. Whatever she's gone through has been something you don't ever want to go through. So you stay out of her face and you let her be. And my aunties were really, you know, they really made sure that there was no questions asked, that anytime I was in their homes, I just felt safe. I felt wanted. I felt appreciated. I felt seen. I felt loved. And I just felt like I had some stability.
Wow. That's quite something, isn't it?
It is.
The contrast is massive. And to have that safety must have meant a massive amount. And the other thing that stands out is that they loved you absolutely for who you were and are. Amazing.
Yes, 100%. I learned everything I know about love. I learned it's an action word. We don't just say I love you, but we show it. A lot of them never said I love you physically, but they showed it immensely. So I'm eternally grateful to the love I was shown growing up. Yes.
Oh, I love what you say there. It's an action word. I've never heard anyone say that. And beautifully said. So how did life unfold? It was pretty tough. It was challenging. On the one hand, you had stability. On the other hand, it was quite rocky. How did all of that unfold? what took place?
Well, I just tried to fit in a lot. So everywhere I went, I just did what other people did. I mean, if the girls were sleeping around, you know what, Mary? I slept around. I ended up pregnant at 15. If the guys were selling drugs, I ended up selling drugs. Everybody had to eat. My daughter had to eat. I'm from Las Vegas, so I worked at Wet n Wild during the day, and I worked at a strip club at night by the time I turned 18. I had a daughter then. I had to survive. I had to feed my child. A lot of the people from my hometown in Reno were going to California so that they could get public assistance. They give you Section 8, which is like, reduced rent or free rent in a lot of circumstances. They give you food stamps. They give you a check, almost $1,000 if you have a kid. So if your rent is free, you're getting $1,000 and you get $500 in food stamps. You thought you had it made at 16, 17 years old. There wasn't much else you were asking for then, Mary.
No, that's right. Gosh, that's and like I'm almost lost for words to put that all together. 15 to 16, someone else to care for and love. And how did you care and love for you though?
I didn't. No, I didn't. Which is why I was able to work in a strip club, which is why I was able to sleep around and be so promiscuous, which is why I was able to, up and leave a relationship or a city in a heartbeat. I didn't care for myself, nor did I love myself or see the value or worth in myself. And I can look back on my life now and it's very evident. So, which is a beautiful thing, because when I work with young girls and I see them doing what I once did, I instantly can recognize exactly what that thing is. And I'm able to show that girl not only that I love her, because love is an action word, but her own value, her own worth, the fact that she was blessed to have a child when there are women paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to get pregnant. I'm able to turn every negative thing I went through into a positive thing and just reach back and save another young Rachel. That's my passion, Mary, is making sure that they know that what I've been through is solely so that they don't have to go through it.
And that makes you a very strong advocate for women, for youth. And I like what you're saying, because when you meet these young people or women your age, you have a really deep understanding of where they're standing at the moment. So what changed everything? Was there a moment in your life where you knew there was a line in the sand?
Well, in 1998, I was at a graduation party for a gentleman who graduated from college. In my community, we usually don't graduate from high school, much less college. So it was a big deal. I was at a party and my cousin got jumped by some girls and I shot a gun in the air and the bullet ricocheted off a sign. I was 21 years old and that bullet ricocheted off a sign, and out of a parking lot full of about 150 or 200 people, according to the police report, that bullet ended up killing my uncle. Now, mind you, this is the only brother, my grandmother's only living son. My aunties, the same ones I was just talking about who took me in my whole life, it's their only brother. It's the only man who ever bought my children diapers and never asked for anything in return, Mary. I mean, I literally killed the man who had protected me my whole life from other men, from my own father, from abusive relationships. I mean, and I ended up going to jail. And again, it was 5 days before my daughter's 5th birthday. And going to jail really made me, I looked around and I went, wow, people I would never normally associate with, because I did see myself as, the head and, a little more sedity, more upper class at times, Mary. So I would not have associated, even though I was a stripper, I wasn't actually a hooker. So I wouldn't go associate with people, actual prostitutes, even though I sold drugs. I was never a drug addict, so I didn't see myself as a crackhead or a dope fiend, as we call in the community. I always saw myself as more up. But when I got locked up, I was with all these other women who were women I would have never really associated with, just because I looked at them a certain way. And we all were in our county blues and we all had a story. And ultimately we all were fighting for our freedom. And so that was really my life change, that I really looked around and went, I was 21 years old and this was an opportunity for me to get it right. I never, ever saw myself going to prison, because it was an accident all the way through. There was obviously, all I needed to do was wait for trial. And once I got to trial, I'd be found not guilty and I'd be sent home. And I just knew that in my heart of all hearts, Mary. So I just thought, okay, you know what, Rachel, you're in jail now. You have to get this thing right. You need to work on yourself. I was raised very religious, from whether I was with my mother's side of the family or my father's side. You know, they both had huge reputations in the community. On my mother's side, my Uncle Ernest was the first officer killed in the line of duty. So he hangs, even now at the Metro Police Station, he hangs on their memorial wall as the first officer. My great-grandmother was the first female blackjack dealer. My grandfather was, you know, he owned the Boulder Club, which ultimately burned down and became the Horseshoe. Just, my family has great history on my mother's side, on the white side. And then my father's side, the McAllister side, has great history too. You know, they came out here from Oklahoma. They came from slavery to the 21st century. There was a whole book written about the McAllister family through the Madera High School. And, you know, just great. I come from great stock, as they would say, Mary. So here I am sitting in jail. Everybody knows my last name because Reno's very small. So as soon as they're like, you know, in jail, they call you by your last name. And so anytime you hear McAllister, you're like, whoa, there's a McAllister in here. And so people kind of perk up and want to see who it is and where'd she come from. And, oh, that's Calvin's daughter. My father's Calvin. And because the family is so tight knit, it was instantly like, oh, you know, they protected me. They looked out for me. They loved on me. I have real thick hair. And in jail, you get these little tiny plastic combs. So the girls would give me brushes because you got to actually purchase a brush. So they'd give me real brushes. Like instantly, they all just, you know, kind of rallied around me. But in that moment, I realized I have a legacy to uphold. Like, I need to be somebody because I don't want the family names either or to fall short on my behalf. You know, I want, what are my grandkids going to hear one day about their grandma? She was locked up for murder. Like, I just didn't want that to be my story.
Gosh, can we just back up a little bit? That was so much. And it, like, there's a lot there. Just for the listeners, just back up a little bit. You were at this graduation party, things went down, you decide there was a gun there, shot it in the air. Just slow up for us. What actually happened to that bullet?
So where I'm from in the neighborhood, if you hear a gunshot, and probably where you're from too, but you hear a gunshot, you run, you duck, you get out of the way. You don't ask who did it. You don't look around. You get out of the way. So I shot the guns to disperse this crowd because my cousin was being jumped in the middle of this crowd. And so I pointed the gun in the air and I shot the gun in the air. Well, there was a metal sign because we were at a bowling alley. And so that bullet ended up hitting the metal sign from the bowling alley. And it ricocheted back down. And as everybody's ducking and running out of the way of it, my own uncle, who was going over there with my cousin or wherever he may have been, I don't even know, because we left him dying on the curb. Because after I shot the gun, you know, they pulled my cousin into the car and we all just drove off. So we had no idea that our Uncle Pinky was on a curb dying. As a matter of fact, as we were driving off, the ambulance was passing us. And so, you know, we had no idea. So that bullet ended up hitting a metal sign and ricocheting back down and killing my uncle.
Wow. And so you left because it was the timing to do so and it was a break and you jumped in the car. You went home, is that right? And then what happened? Just walk us through those next 30, 40, 50 minutes. Tell us what happened then.
Well, at the time I was actually staying with my aunt, which is my uncle's sister. And so me and my cousin were staying there. So we went back to my aunt's house. And when we got in the door, my aunt was hanging up the phone and she looked at us and she said, "We have to get to the hospital. Something's wrong with your uncle." And I immediately was like, oh my God, I shot a gun. Now, this is my first time. I had never shot a gun before. I'm not a fighter. I don't get in fights. My cousin's always gotten fights, but I was not a fighter. I just, you know, it is what it is. I know how to walk away. But long story short, I said, oh my God, I shot this gun. So they said, well, you don't come with us. You stay here because if whatever's going on has to do anything with you. Nobody was really sure of what was going on yet. And so they ended up leaving me at the apartment with my aunt, at my aunt's apartment, and my aunt and my cousin went up there. I later ended up driving to the hospital, which is where I was arrested, with another group of young men who had come to the house as well. And so I was like, we gotta go to the hospital. So we got in the car, went to the hospital, and that's where I was arrested, at the hospital.
So here you are, you're 21 years of age, your daughter hasn't turned 5 yet, you go to visit your uncle because you know that he's been seriously wounded at this stage, and then the police, what actually happened in that moment of your arrest?
Well, so going into the hospital, now all they know is that he's been shot, and they don't know, they know the suspect could possibly be me. They don't know too much of anything else. So there are guards, the police are guarding the hospital because, again, I live in a smaller community. Reno's not that big. So everybody's going to the hospital now. There's probably hundreds of people at the hospital, and my family is huge. So my family's showing up at the hospital. It's becoming, quite boisterous at this point. Everybody's trying to figure out who did it, what happened, where are they at, and so ultimately I pull up to the hospital, and there's police at the gate not letting anybody in, and they ask the driver, "What's your name? Let me see your driver's license." That gentleman gave his name and his license. Then I'm in the passenger seat, and they're like, "What's your name?" And I said, "Rachel," and they just drew their guns on me, and they were like, "Rachel what?" And I was like, "Rachel McAllister," and they're like, "Get out of the car, put your hands where I could see them." And I put my hands where they could see them. Again, I never even had a traffic ticket before this, Mary. I had never been in trouble, no juvenile trouble. I mean, I worked at the YMCA. I was a teacher. I had never, by this time I had already gotten my life together. I wasn't in the strip clubs. I wasn't, I had left both of my babies' fathers. I was a single mother now. I had 2 children, but I was doing the right thing at this time. So there was nothing in me that was malicious or evil or whatever. And so when they said, "What's your name?" I didn't think, oh, give them an alias. I just said Rachel. I also didn't think they were looking for me for murder. I definitely didn't think that. And so I, put my hands out of the window. They snatched me out of the car, threw me on the ground, handcuffed me, put me in the back of the car. I can now see the mirrors around me, all the side view mirrors, and I can see one of my cousins dropping to his knees crying. And by now I know that my uncle's probably dead because look how the police just treated me, and look at all my family members around me. And so I can kind of put 2 and 2 together. And I was like asking the officer, "Did my uncle die? Did my uncle die?" And, he wouldn't answer me. And it was just a whirlwind.
Wow, yes. And like I say, let's keep the context. You're 21, you're a young mum, you loved your uncle, and here you are on your way to jail, as it were. It must, it's shock. I've heard part of the story before, but it's shocking. It still shocks me now, and I'm sure the audience will feel it.
Yes.
So there you are. Your world's completely upended, and there you are in jail with other people that you never imagined. You had stories in your head about you. You knew quite a lot about maybe their background. It's a close-knit community. So how long did it take to go to trial, and then what happened?
Well, it took I was incarcerated for 222 days up until the point that I was released. However, so I get locked up in May. In November, I went to trial. And all the evidence in trial says it's an accident. There's pain on the tip of the bullet. They bring in the witnesses that say Rachel wouldn't hurt a fly and so on and so forth. But the jury found me guilty of second-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon. And so as soon as I heard, we the jury find the defendant in the above entitled action, Rachel Diane McAllister, guilty, I just went guilty, and then second-degree murder, because it could have been first-degree, second-degree, manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, gross misdemeanor with substantial bodily harm. There's a bunch of different things they could have found me guilty on, but to find me guilty of murder, I knew anything with murder in it was a life sentence. And in Nevada, there's something called a weapons enhancement. So if you commit a crime with a weapon, you get double whatever sentence you get. So it was now 2 life sentences at 21 years old. And I literally, the room started spinning. I started throwing up. I passed out. I hit this chair. My family was in the courtroom, so they start going ballistic because everybody forgave me. Everybody knew it was an accident. Everybody knew I was defending my cousin, trying to get her in the car. Like, nobody at all was expecting this verdict. And it was, you know, even as the jury, because each jury member has to say that, yes, they find you guilty individually. And so even as they're saying, yes, you know, individually, they're all crying. Every one of them are crying, Mary. And I'm crying, looking at them crying, and I'm thinking, what is going on? How are you crying, but yet finding me guilty? It was literally out of a movie. And it was just something that I could not believe how off the justice system was until that moment.
Absolutely, right in your face. And so what happened then? What did the judge do? What did he say? What was the next procedure?
Well, after that, hold on, Heaven. Okay. After that, I was actually, so you get convicted. I got convicted, and then I had about a 30-day window that I had to wait because this was about Thanksgiving. Well, come to find out, the jury did not want to keep deliberating through Thanksgiving. So they had come to the conclusion that if we just find her guilty and we're wrong, the judge will overturn it, but at least we get to go home with our families for Thanksgiving, and we're not sitting in here deliberating all through Thanksgiving. And so the judge at the time, he actually went, he was a visiting judge from Las Vegas, because again, I have a very prominent family in Reno. So this visiting judge came in from Las Vegas to Reno to sit for the trial. He had went home as well for Thanksgiving because he just knew it was going to be not guilty. There's really no reason to receive a not guilty verdict. Let the girl go home. And so he was gone as well. It was a judge that was not familiar with my case at the time. So when the guilty verdict came in, I had to wait a month up until almost Christmas time before I went in to receive the sentencing. And so during that time, you have to meet with probation to see, because it's not a probationable offense, but they want to see your risk levels and they want to see your support system. Where will your children be now? Like all the, you're getting ready to go to prison for a really long time stuff happens within those 30 days. And so I'm losing my mind because I never thought I'd be going to prison, much less for 2 life sentences. And, but to be honest, at that time, Mary, I said, so when I was in jail, because I was raised in the church on both sides of family, when I was in jail, I started reading my Bible. I started praying. I started finding my own religion, if I may. I started really, really, praying for the women and seeing them get out of jail. Like all these miracle signs and wonders were happening. They called me the church lady. Like my identity was found in Christ at that time. And so I just said during that 30-day period of waiting, you know what, God, if you desire for me to go to prison to serve you, I'm going to go wherever you want me to. As much as I thought I was going home, you know what's better for me than I do. And I finally surrendered. That's where my true incarceration ended, Mary. I love to say that, was when I was still physically incarcerated, but mentally in my mind, I had surrendered my life. That whatever happens, happens, and I'm willing to flow with it all because I still have breath in my body and I still have children that are there. I still have my mother. I still have my family who loves me. So come what may, whatever I need to do to just survive at this point, I have been used to barely surviving. So it wasn't like I'm just used to thriving, and I had just recently started thriving up until this point. I had just recently started going back to church on my own, getting baptized on my own. All those other things were like when I was young, my family kind of made me do it. But before I got locked up, I had just been already finding my own religion at that time. And so it wasn't, I said, whatever, if I got to go to prison, God, I'm willing. And when the judge came, when we went in to receive the sentencing, my attorneys, my public defenders actually, they said to me, Rachel, don't expect anything because you're going to have to go to prison for a few years. This is just how it works. But if we ask for the life sentences, we have a better appeal for you. So don't be worried. We're going to ask for life because it was 25 years to life. And so they're, here I am, 21 years old, looking at them going, they're like, don't worry. We need to ask the judge for life twice so that we can have a better appeal process 10 years from now. And I'm just like, I cannot believe this is my life. But now remember, at this point I'm surrendered, so I'm listening to them, but I don't really hear them, Mary. And I went into my jail cell, into my holding cell at the courthouse, and I just said, you know what, God, they said don't expect anything, but I expect something from you. If you know my heart, you said if I ask for bread, you're not going to give me a stone. You know who I really am. I'm not a malicious murderer. And ultimately, God, I need you to defend me in this courtroom. I need you to come through because I'm not going to make it two life sentences anywhere. I'm 21 years old. My daughter, my son, like it was just a lot. So nonetheless, I went in to receive the sentencing, and the judge who had sat with the trial was back now. And he said, you know what, I don't know how this verdict came about, but I'm overturning this verdict and I'm sending Miss McAllister home with her children for Christmas. I'm making this bail bondable. He gave me a $20,000 bondable bail, which means I only needed $2,000 to get out, which in the state of Nevada up to that point had been totally unheard of. A convicted murderer who gets bail and it's a bondable bail at $2,000. Like that is something Nevada had not done up until that point. And the judge said, if we can't come up with this bail money within 2 days, we need to be back in this courtroom so that we can fix this because she will be home with her children for Christmas. And I was.
Wow.
And I was.
Oh, God. Oh, my goodness. Oh, it's, yeah, take a breath. Take a breath.
Whew.
Thank you. I know that it was a long time ago, but it still hits, doesn't it?
All the time.
You know, I could feel my heart racing. You know, I put my hand here, but I can feel it racing for you. And you go home for Christmas, thinking what?
Well, when I went home for Christmas. Yes, when I went home for Christmas, I wasn't really thinking anything. They had only overturned the verdict, but they didn't dismiss the charges. So there's still a chance of me going back to trial. I didn't want to put my family through that. I mean, it wasn't over yet. You know, there was still a lot, but I got out, I got my children, and I lost my mind, Mary. Everything I swore I would never do, I absolutely did. I became an alcoholic. I became a drug addict. I became, I talk about promiscuous. I was hurting so bad. And in my mind, I deserved to be hurting because my uncle had 6 children. And my family, they weren't letting me miss the family barbecues or the family reunion or anything. I had been a part of those things my whole life. And so now it was like, even more so, you're going to be a part of this because, especially for the older folks, you know, they're like, oh no, we don't play that. She's family. She'll always be family. And I had to face the family all the time and, you know, face his mom, which was my grandma, and his sisters and my cousins and his children, which were my cousins. And I just couldn't do that clean or sober. I had to numb that somehow. And I got really, really heavily involved in everything under the sun, Mary.
You know, you mentioned before the word forgiveness. Such an underrated word, isn't it? Like when you put it like that, you're facing this wonderful uncle that you adored's mother, and you're mixing with them. You're still part of the family. You're still a loved part of this family. What was the whole meaning of forgiveness for you? Do you remember, or what's it like now?
At that time, I think forgiveness was just allowing me to be around. I don't, you know, a lot of his children were still very hurt, and they couldn't understand how my grandmother could forgive me or even want me around. You know, she killed your son. There was a lot of lashing out sometimes from my cousins, you know, but again, the older generation was like, hey, none of that. If you don't want it, then you can leave. She ain't going nowhere. She's already been here. We're not going to get rid of her now. Like very, very old school, Mary. Like, we are family. If you don't like it, that's fine. But she ain't going nowhere. And I was just more like, if y'all only knew, I wish I could go somewhere. I would look at my cousins and give them the look. Like, I don't want to be here just as much as you don't want me here, you know, but here I am. So we got to do something. And so I let them vent many a times, Mary, many of occasions. And I just had to take it because I knew that I was the one who shot that gun. I knew that I was the reason their dad wasn't there for their birthdays and their dad wasn't there for Christmas and I knew that. And so I understood that, that their pain was justified. What they didn't know was I was hurting just as bad, that I was just as bad as they were hurting, I was hurting, and worse because I was the one who did it. And so it's bad enough when somebody passes, but then when you're the one who caused the passing, it was unbearable. And which is why I got into things I swore I would never ever do because I saw it devastate my mom and my dad. And up until that point, I was not an alcoholic or a drug addict or any, but after that point, and here I am, God let me out of jail, and now I walked away from God because I started doing drugs and drinking and partying really bad, and, God will never forgive me. How do I ever get back right? Where do you even begin after God literally produces a miracle? You go in to get 2 life sentences and you get sent home to your children for Christmas. Like, there's no reason that you should ever have to run away from God at that point, but just living. My family had got to mourn for almost a year without my uncle. I had not yet because I was locked up. So I had not been to the family functions without him yet. They had. I had not, went to pick up the phone and not been able to call him yet. They had. I had not went to answer the mysterious 3:00 phone call in the morning and it not be him. They had done all these things already. And so everything was very fresh to me. And they had got some opportunity to already deal with some of these things, and I hadn't yet. So it was really hard for me to be able to cope. And then there was finding a balance because I didn't want them to look at me and think that I wasn't, I still was a mom. I still had my children. I still had to make sure that they got to school, and I showed up for parent-teacher conference, and I still had to go grocery shopping. I still had to be able to live, but I didn't ever want my family to think that I had just moved on and that I was now over it or it had just disappeared somehow. So even trying to find the balancing act so that they knew that I was still remorsive and sorry and that my life was not just normal or, but also trying to make sure that they knew that I knew I still had to live. I still had children to take care of. I still had, God, it was just, it was a lot.
That's right. And Rachel, yes, gosh, just take a breather. Just pause for a minute.
Mary, only you do this to me. I love you, my friend.
Oh, my goodness. And the internet's challenging us a little bit, so I apologise for that. But I wanted to keep going. The impact of this to people's lives is really important. There's a message here. And just tell us ever so briefly, if you would, because I want to transition to what you're doing now and what happened with the sentencing. What was the ultimate outcome, if you like? What did you have to settle with? I'm picking my words here.
Yes, ultimately I had to plead guilty. I chose to plead guilty to manslaughter with the use of a deadly weapon. I didn't want to take my family through trial again and risk being found guilty for anything, much less having them have to constantly, relive it, hear the stories. And, they were testifying, my character witnesses, the victim impact statements, the panel. I just didn't want them to have to go through that again. So I did plead guilty to manslaughter. And I ended up getting probation because I had never been in trouble before. So I got like 10 years or 12 years suspended sentence. So if I was in trouble, then I would go to prison for at least 12 years, 5 years probation. It was a first time offense. So it was just a first time offense probational charge at that point. But it changed my whole life. I couldn't get a job. I could never work with children again because it was still a felony. It was a Class A felony. My whole life, everything, even my own children, having to register as a felon everywhere we moved. And being subject to police search and seizures. Every time the police got behind me, they pulled me over. They'd take me and my children out of the car to search my car for weapons, to search my car for drugs, to search my car for any contraband, or, just them coming to my home, constantly searching my home for whatever. They didn't know that I was telling the truth and I really wasn't this evil, malicious murderer. They didn't know. They just looked at the file and were doing their jobs. But just the constant, barrage of privacy that you just don't have, that's constantly being invaded, and having children who you want to say the police are good guys to, but every time something happens with the police, it looks like they might be bad guys. So, it was a lot.
Well, I think it challenges values, it challenges our belief system. But just to be clear for the listeners, if you were going to go back to retrial, that you still would have had to be incarcerated, I think that's what you said before, for 10 years. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes. Well, actually, if I would have went back to a trial, I wouldn't have had to have been incarcerated. What I would have had to do was risk being found guilty again of murder. So originally, can you hear me? My computer froze. Can you hear me, Mary? Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Just looks frustrating.
The recording has stopped.
Uh-oh, hello? Uh-oh. So.
Okay, I'll just pause the recording, so.
Okay.
Are you doing okay?
I am. I'm grateful that I get to tell the whole story and not just the good parts. Sometimes people just want to hear, okay, let's get through this and just get to what you're doing now. But I'm glad that I get to actually tell the whole thing, Mary. Thank you.
Well, I was going with the flow, and then I thought that I might be re-traumatizing you, so that wasn't my intent.
No. What you're doing is you're allowing me to, again, have a voice. Nobody ever asked me, like, about the hospital, or, these aren't things that people, not really how'd you get arrested, or these little things that the story, it does matter. I went to I knew that they were, I knew that I wasn't supposed to be at that hospital, but I showed up on my own. I wasn't just going to run from the thing. And so even to be able to recollect my own story is very important. So thank you for that.
Okay. I also, and I'll just say this and we'll move on, but I also think, Rachel, that these are the things that get forgotten, like thrown to the ground. There I am in front of my cousins, like what that would, I think people need to know that's actually what goes on, because people just hear, oh yes, the police came and took me. They don't hear how, at 21, that's a brutal event. It's absolutely so impactful, and I think people deserve to know. So I just, but like I say, it wasn't my intent to re-traumatize you.
No, it's not traumatizing at all. I'm grateful, Mary. I'm grateful.
Okay, so we'll start again, and I'll just pick up, and we're probably going to go a little bit longer. Is that okay?
That's fine. I have time if you have time. I don't want to discredit what you're doing either, so just let me know.
No.
Okay.
At the end of the day, this is all about you, and I want your story to be told, so I have plenty of time.
Thank you, Mary.
All right, so I'll just start again. I'll pick up, and then I've got your book here, and I'll talk about, so, okay, you had got the verdict, and it seems like this was the best, and it was. I get it, you know, and I want people to get. You didn't want to sit in jail for 10 years. I thought that was really important, and I see people's lives totally ruined, and when they are free, and I don't know the half of it, they're not really free. Okay,
Yes.
so you okay? We'll kick in again.
Perfect.
Let me just do this.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, we lost Rachel there. The internet let us down totally, so we're picking up things again. Rachel, and it was probably the internet divine intervention for you to catch your breath and, just come back to things. What an amazing, amazing event, a first time in so many respects, but not to mention the massive impact of your life. You were free, but you weren't free. Say something about that.
Yes, that's one thing that I talk about in the book is the incarceration. Incarceration is, I learned really quick that it's not a physical thing. I was drunk in a bathtub one time, and my cousin Trenton came in, one of my male cousins, and I'm drunk in a bathtub, and he said, you know what, Rachel, if we knew you were going to do this, if we knew you were going to put yourself in your own prison, we would have just left you in there. We would have never even bailed you out. If we knew we were going to have to watch your demise and watch how you were going to, we would have never even, you're not free. And I was just looked at him, you know, a bottle of Hennessy in one hand and a cold bathtub, just looking at him going, you have no idea what you just said, because you're 100% right. Not only am I not free, but now I have somebody who loves me enough to tell me that. So, you know, that was another dagger where I just went, I've got to get this right. I got to come together, man. But how do you come together when you're so broken and so falling apart? I didn't know how.
And was there a moment when you decided this is it? What happened? There was a moment.
There was a moment. I actually moved from Reno, where I'm from, to Las Vegas, and I said, I'm going to start over. I'm going to take my children. I'm going to go to Las Vegas. Nobody knows me. Nobody knows what happened. Nobody knows my uncle, who was the town barber in Reno. Everybody knew him, and, you know, you were the one who killed him, kind of thing. And though everybody forgave me, I just still felt it. And so I said, I'm going to go to Vegas, and I'm going to just do this thing, and I'm going to change, and I'm going to leave everything behind. And I packed up my kids and I moved to Las Vegas. And ultimately, I got to Las Vegas and I really lost my mind. There's more drugs and clubs in Vegas than in Reno, Mary. And everywhere I went, I was still there. And so because I was still there, the pain was still there. Yeah, maybe I didn't see my family as much and I didn't run into his children at the grocery store. Maybe I didn't, but I was still there. And the guilt and the shame and the depression and the weight was still there of what I had done. And so my ultimate decision was to kill myself. And I was going to pick up 400 ecstasy pills and take them and go to sleep and never wake up, I thought. And I wrote a letter. My mother was addicted to crack cocaine at the time, but I had wrote a letter, and that letter said, if you find this letter, I am dead and I want my kids to be with my mom and not their fathers. And that was my ode to the world. You know, this is it. I can't get away from me. And the only way that I'm going to be set free is if I set myself free. And that's what I thought was going to be the end all be all for me, was death itself, Mary.
So why are you here?
Because I'm not from Vegas, and at the time back then in you know the early 2000s, pagers were bigger of a deal than cell phones. I didn't have a cell phone, and my Connect said when you get off the freeway, you're going to make a right. When you get off the freeway on Cheyenne, you're going to make a right. You're going to see Civic Center. I got off the freeway, I made a right, and I saw a street called Rainbow, and I was lost in a neighborhood I'm not from, and I didn't want to just keep driving around. So ultimately, I went ahead and got pulled over to a car wash to pick up the phone to call my Connect to find out where he lived at. And there was a car wash there with the Victory Outreach Men's Home. And Victory Outreach is a church that reaches drug addicts, gang members, prostitutes, homeless people. Like, it was the most they're like, can we wash your car? And I'm like, sure, I'm already dead. I don't care if you wash my car or not. I'm literally trying to use a payphone, whatever. But the kid that asked me if he could wash my car had a teardrop tattoo. And from my neighborhood, if you have a teardrop tattoo, it usually means that you took a life. And with this teardrop tattoo, he said, you know what, sis, I don't know what you're going through, but there's no pit so deep down, so far down that God's hand is not able to pull you out of it. And I just looked at him with that teardrop tattoo, and I just knew, you probably know exactly the guilt and the shame and the weight that I carry. And for you to say that to me right now as I'm literally on my deathbed, again, I had served God. I knew God was real. I saw miracles in jail. Me getting out and not going to prison. I didn't spend one day in prison. That alone was a miracle. Like, I knew God was real, Mary. I just didn't think God could forgive me. And I didn't think God would hear me. I just thought I had disappointed God so much that he would never have anything to do with me again. And when I saw that young man with that teardrop tattoo, and he reminded me, and there was something in me that flickered, and I just went, you're absolutely right. And with the teardrop tattoo, you must know what I'm talking about. The churches I went to, nobody had tattoos, Mary. Nobody had children at 15. Nobody, they were saints in those churches. So I wasn't used to a church full of people who were so grateful that God rescued them that they'd be willing to give up everything at any moment to serve God to the fullest. I didn't go to those churches growing up. I went to churches that your family went to, and you were a kid of that family, so then you went to that church, and then your kids went to that church, and generational churches, but not churches for lost people like myself, or I didn't think they were. And that young man reminded me that there is a God, and he was still watching, and he was at that payphone, and I didn't call that connect, and I ended up at Victory Outreach Church at the altar, and that is where literally I laid down my life. So I did die that day, Mary. Let's get it clear. I died that day. I just didn't die physically. I died spiritually, and I surrendered yet again my life to the Lord. And here I am almost 30 years later, a testimony that God's grace is still alive and well today.
Well, you liberated yourself as well, didn't you? That's
absolutely.
You liberated yourself through the power of God and the power of the physicalness of the support that was surrounding you. So I'm very fortunate I have your book, and I read it on the plane and it touched me, which is why, well, it's not why we're here today, but it's part of why we're here today. Tell us what you're doing now, Rachel. Tell us what's making your heart sing.
Well, now I'm just going around and I'm just reminding people, just like I did in Paris, I'm going around globally, reminding people that we are not what we have done. We are not what we have done. Our past is not an indication of our future. And if anything, the things that we lived through are now the things that we have lived through to change. So I sit on a lot of boards and a lot of community panels for homeless pregnant teenagers, for pregnant teenagers, for high school dropouts, for formerly incarcerated people or justice impacted individuals. Now I'm an advocate for young people, for juvenile justice reform, for criminal justice reform. Now I just take every bit of pain I've ever been through, Mary, and I use it to try to make genuine change in our communities.
Well, your book says From Pit to Purpose, and you've certainly found your purpose. Tell me this, as you sit here all these years on, has much changed in the system in terms of, let's think about women being incarcerated? What chance have they got of creating some sense of, I nearly used the word normal, then I thought, well, what does that actually mean? So I'm not going to use that, but how likely is it from where you sit that, given the systems that are in place, and I'm guessing they're not much different here, of a woman who's been incarcerated coming into the community, getting fully employed and having a fulfilling life? What's the chance of that happening?
Slim to none, Mary, because as soon as you get out, you are restricted at everything. Not only do they pull background checks, which make it very hard to get a job, It's hard to get cars. It's hard. Your car insurance is high. I mean, everything that could be counted against you is counted against you, which is why I'm very passionate about working with the women while they're in prison. So we're already developing business plans while they're in prison. We're already working on their mental health and restoring their parental rights while they're still incarcerated, so that when they get out, the fight is not that hard. Because upon exiting, you just want your children, you want to be normal again. You want your kids back. You want to be able to find a job, and you want to be able to take care of those kids. And without being able to do those things, or fighting so hard when you get out, your mind starts to make you believe it'd be so much easier when you were locked up. Because when you were locked up, people helped you with your kids. Now all of a sudden, nobody wants to keep your kids anymore. You can't find a babysitter. They feel like, well, you're not working, so you should keep your kids. You're like, I'm looking for work, so I can't keep my kids. It just becomes a revolving door. And so there's part of you that feels like, if I was locked up, my family would jump right back in and keep my kids. They would be sending me money. They would be helping me out. They would be actually looking out for me if I was incarcerated. Whereas here I am in the streets and I can't get any help from anybody. And that can be very difficult. And more importantly, it can be, mentally, it can play with your emotions. It can really make you feel depressed and obsessed. And, next thing you know, you're committing petty crime just to go back to jail for the escape, and not, because everything is just stacked against you on the outside sometimes, Mary, which is why I'm so passionate about going into these spaces and places and speaking about reform and what we can really do to help the people, coming out of jail. It's not just, okay, you're free, go get a life. That you've lost everything. You've lost everything. And now the odds of you getting back anything you had before are null and void. And now you can't get a job. Now everything that you do is being scrutinized. So nobody really thinks that you've really changed. So they're still looking for you to sell drugs again, or they're still looking for you to use drugs again, or they're still nitpicking. You've been locked up 10, 15 years and you get out and they're still thinking you are who you were when you went in years ago. And you have no way to even prove that you're not, because everybody still thinks you are. And that can just be very difficult. So a lot of times I'm just a friend. I'm a friend to these women. I show up at their court cases. I become a mediator for them to get their children back. I'm a pen pal while they are incarcerated, so that they have somebody on the outside who is waiting for them when they come home, who has resources to help them out, who knows where you can get an apartment, because that's another thing. Housing, once they pull your background, they deny you for housing. They deny you for a job. Anything to be able to get your children back is denied instantly. So you have to know, people, places, and things to be able to have any opportunity to be able to have any sense of normalcy again. And it can be very difficult for people who don't want to go back to the old life, but that's all you know and it's all you have.
That's right. And difficult doesn't even cut it. It's damn near impossible to start or recreate, let's say, a new life. Like you said before, you're still imprisoned, even though you're not physically imprisoned. And have you been able to get companies to hire these women? Is that part of your advocacy work? You're getting companies now to take these women in?
Absolutely.
I didn't mean it quite like that came out. These people a new opportunity. Forgive me, that was not good words.
No, those are great words, because that's really what it is. We have to embrace them when they come out. We need to take them in. They have to have a new community, because the old community they left when they got locked up is what got them in trouble most of the time. And so those are great words to use. So yes, I work with a staffing agency called SUNS, which is See Us Now Staffing, SUNS. And they have a fair chance workforce. So they do help formerly incarcerated people get jobs. They are helping them with the mentorship piece, with the programming piece, helping them with their children, helping them bring, just, again, have just a family. One thing about Victory Outreach is we create a sense of belonging. And so when you have a sense of belonging, that you belong somewhere, you have a tendency to show up in that space, bigger and brighter than you did when you didn't belong. And so we create a sense of belonging for them. Housing, I work with quite a few people now who are willing to give, whether it's a shared living space or private apartments, depending on the financial, need that, the finances that the women have at the time or the people have at the time. It's not just women, it's men too. My heart is women, but there's a lot of men as well who have the benefit of being able to work. But through the staffing agency, we're able to get great jobs for people. And yes, they might be temp jobs, but many of them go into, permanent hire. And a lot of them don't know what they want to do yet. So, but being able to do a temporary job for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, now they don't have to run away from that job and go, I don't like that. No, now they get to do different things to really find out, what do I like doing? Who am I really? What am I passionate about? What have I been created to do, God? Why am I still living? And where do I go from here? So it's such a great opportunity for them to have, different experiences in short amount of time.
Absolutely. And the mere fact that you're there, and there, you're providing the stability for them must be so deeply impactful, and it helps give permission, because I think what you're saying is that we need permission then to be able to form a new identity and be the person that we are now, not what we were then and what other people thought we were. I'm saying this slowly so it makes sense to the listeners, because I see every day people struggling with their identity, and they haven't been incarcerated as such in the formal way that you and I are talking, but they've been incarcerated in their mind, in their limiting beliefs, in their self-talk and all of those. And don't get me wrong, I'm not comparing it, I'm just saying that identity is such a powerful thing, and I said you're a force to be reckoned with when we started, but you're such a powerhouse. You're such a, what should I say? You're a deeply impactful woman, Rachel, and I'm going to end us here in a little minute, because I believe you've touched all our listeners today. You've certainly touched me once again with your story, but more importantly, with your truth of the moments of where you've been, where you are. And I know that you're a change maker. I know that. Is there one thing you'd like to say to the listeners that you'd like to leave us with today?
Don't judge a person by their background check. If you pulled up my background, you would never even have a chance to meet me and speak with me and hear my story, because it would be against your company policy, or it might even be against your own moral compass at times to speak to a murderer or whatever that might look like. And just grace, grace is so important. You just never know what people have been through. And a lot of people who have been through things, they've lived through things that you could never even, you couldn't survive in if you tried. And so it's just really good to have different experiences. One thing you said in your keynote in Paris was leadership, the connection was more important than the title. And that's why I just connected with you so, because that's who I am. I can be chaplain or pastor or Miss Rachel or teacher or who, but really I am your friend. And so a lot of these young people that I get the opportunity to mentor or just walk through life with, I look at their backgrounds, they tell me what they've been through, but I would never know that. I would never know you were involved in gangs and you tied somebody up in the trunk and whatever happened. And a lot of times it's other influences that are influencing 14, 15-year-old kids to do these ridiculous, crazy things. A lot of times they do it out of fear. If they don't do it, they could be the one in the trunk tied up. Like, you just never know why people have done what they've done. So don't try to understand it. Just accept them for who they are now. If they have the privilege of opening up to you, perfect. But even if they don't want to talk about it, that's fine too. Just let people find out who they are, because once you find out who you really are, there's no turning back. I can speak about what I speak about now almost 30 years later, but the first 20, maybe 15, 20 years, I cried every birthday that was my uncle's, March 25th. May 17th is when he died. I cried every May 17th. He has 6 kids. I cried when they had children. I cried when they had birthdays. I cried when my grandma died. Like, it was just, there was a lot of emotion attached to everything, and I could never, ever, ever speak about it. God forbid. It was under the rug. It was in my past, and that's where it was going to stay. I don't want anybody to know. But ultimately, it now is my PowerPoint to be able to say, hey, you just never know what somebody's been through. And more importantly, you don't know where they're going.
Wow. well said, and I like that you don't know where they're going, but you can be part of where they're going.
Yes.
And that's really important. I know you've made your mark today, Rachel, and I'm so grateful not only to have met you in Paris, but to have a continued friendship with you. And thank you so much for giving your time and your heart so generously to us today.
Thank you, Mary, for giving me the space to be able to give my time and my heart. I appreciate you for that.
Bye-bye.
The recording has stopped.
Bravo!
Yes.
Bless you, Rachel.
Bless you too, Mary. Don't let this be the end of us. I know we will speak again tomorrow, but just know that, this is not just a podcast relationship, my friend.
Oh, no. No, it's not. That's for sure. I'm just looking, just to make sure, at this...